flower themed steering wheel cover. It's going to be a detailed tutorial on how to crochet this steering wheel cover with each step and detailed instructions on how to complete it. It is custom to every steering wheel and it's altogether really simple. So let's get into the video. In order to make these granny squares for the steering wheel cover, you're going to need 3 balls of yarn, all a different color, a measuring tape, dull needles, some type of scissors, and a crochet hook. To start, you're going to take your first color and make a magic loop. You do this by wrapping around 2 fingers, making an X. Take your crochet hook and go underneath the top string and pull through the second one, and then use that same string to yarn over and make a slip knot. Once you have your slip knot, you're going to want to chain 3, and this first chain will count as your first double crochet out of 12. And once you have your chain, you're going to do then 11 more double crochets into the magic loop. You want to make sure you're going through the magic loop when you yarn over and completing your double crochets. And you just want to do that 11 more times after you have your chain 3, giving you 12 total stitches. Once you have all 12 completed, you want to take your loose string and pull your magic loop tight as you can, and pull that tail into the back so you know where your front and back of your starting circle is. Then take your normal yarn and in your first chain 3, count up to the top 1, 2, 3, and do a slip stitch into your project and fasten off. And this finishes your first section of the flower granny square. For the second section of this flower granny square, you're going to take the yarn that you want to be the color of your petals, and you're going to make sure that you have 12 stitches available for each petal. If it comes out to 11, that means that your fasten off, or the space where your chain is going to be one of your stitches. So you're going to go into your first space and pull a loop through and chain 3. And once you have chained 3, you're going to want to tie your loose ends in the back. I did where I fastened off my brown and my new string for my petals. This is very important in order to make sure that your new layers stay together and that none of your layers are going to come apart after you sew it on. For this first petal, you're going to yarn over and go into the same space that your chain is in, and you will end up with 3 loops. You're going to want to pull through the first one, yarn over again, and pull through the first 2, leaving you with 2 loops. You're then going to yarn over again and go through the same stitch, go through the first loop again, and then yarn over and go through the first 2 loops. You will then end with 3 loops, and you want to yarn over and go through all 3 for this first petal. You're then going to want to chain 2, and this next petal will be what the rest of the petals will look like. You're going to yarn over and into your next stitch, yarn over, pull through, have 3 loops, go through the first one, yarn over, go through the next 2, and you will have 2. then go back in and do the same thing again. Yarn over first one, yarn over first two, and you'll have 3, and do it one more time, and you will end up with 4 loops on your hook, and you want to yarn over and pull through all 4. You're going to chain 2 and do it all again. This one will be a little faster. So the pattern is pretty much in each stitch you're yarning over, going through the first loop, then yarning over, going through the second, then yarning over, going back into the stitch, and doing that a total of 3 times, and you should end with 4 loops on your crochet hook, and you want to yarn over and pull through all of those, chain 2, and start your next petal. You want to do this until you have a total of 12 petals around your entire circle. Once you finish all 12 petals, you're going to want to just chain 1 and then find the first chain and go to the very top of the 3 and do a slip stitch to finish your row or second section of this granny square. And then after you do your slip stitch, you want to fasten off. For this final section of the flower granny square, you're going to take your border color and find your first open space, preferably the one you fastened off on, and chain 3, and then take your open ends and tie them together. This was the simplest way I found to make sure my layers were all connected properly. You can do it any way you like to change colors, but this was the way I found most effective and fast for this granny square. Once you've chained 3, you're going to count that as your first double crochet. Into that same space, you're going to do 2 more double crochets. Once those 2 double crochets are finished, you're going to have 3, and you're going to chain 2. And into that same space, you're going to do 3 more double crochets. This is going to end up giving you 2 sections of 3 double crochets, making your very first corner for this granny square. We have been working in a circle the whole time, so now we are trying to make this into a actual square, as you can see there. After you finish that, you're going to move on to your next open space. Don't chain at all, just move straight onto your next open space and do 3 more double crochets. We're going to do this twice, so we're going to do these 3 double crochets and just go on to the next open space and do 3 more double crochets. So these are both singles, and every side of this granny square will have a corner, then 2 sets of double crochets, and then a corner. So we have our 2 sets, and now we're going on to our second corner. And so in our next open space, we're going to do 3 double crochets. And after we do our 3 double crochets, we are going to chain 2, and into that same space, we are going to do 3 more double crochets. And you will have your second corner. Then you're going to follow the same pattern as before, and in the next 2 spaces, do 2 single sets of 3 double crochets, and then your next corner. And you're going to follow this pattern all the way around until you finish your border. Once you've made it around to your last corner, you're going to finish your last 2 single sets of 3 double crochets. So you're going to do your first one, and then once you get to your last one, you're going to do your final 3 double crochets. And then once again, just like the other 2 sections, you're going to find your first chain 3 and count to the top and do a slip stitch into your chain, and after you do your slip stitch you will be able to fasten off, and make sure to tuck in your ends or tie it somehow to make sure that your entire border won't come undone. And then you have finished your first flower granny square. You can use these for a lot of things, but for this project you will need a decent amount. So just make sure that you are tying off all your ends, and then you will be ready for the next step. If you really want your granny squares to look like a perfect square, you may have to do steam blocking or board blocking in order to make them look like normal squares. As you can see with my fingers, it's pretty easy to just stretch them out, but if you want it to be more permanent, you will have to do blocking. Measuring the circumference of your steering wheel is very important, so you can kind of gauge how many granny squares you will need. My steering wheel was about 48 inches, and each of these granny squares is about 4 inches, and with cotton yarn they don't stretch that much. So I guessed I needed around 12, but what I do recommend is measuring your wheel and dividing it by 4, and then taking that number and cutting it in half and adding 1. So if I needed 12 squares, I cut that in half to get 6 and ended up making 7. Once I made 7, I measured the entire strip across my steering wheel and just stretched it, and noticed I needed 2 more, so I ended up making an entirety of 9 squares total in order to measure if the granny squares would reach around the entire steering wheel. As you can see here, you're going to want to take a dull needle, which is meant for threading in your ends, and take yarn that matches your border. And when you have multiple granny squares, I had already made my steering wheel cover by the time I did this granny squares, so I am just showing you an example. You're going to thread your needle and imagine that you have more than one granny square sitting on your table, and you're going to line them up on the edge, and through each stitch you're going to do, I just did a loop stitch, and you're going to go through, and imagine I'm going through 2 squares at once. This will give you an entire rectangle of granny squares, and then you're going to want to take that entire section and sew it together to make one big square. As I just showed with my fingers, you're going to want to take your long strip and then sew it together at the ends. Now the measurement is important just to gauge how many squares you'll need, but once you figure out how many actually fit, you're going to wrap them around your steering wheel as I showed with my pen, and you'll sew in the ends just like I am, but with actual string that matches your border around your physical steering wheel. So once again, you'll take multiple squares, sew them together end to end, then sew the first and last square together to make a circle. Wrap that around your steering wheel, and as I showed, tightly sew your steering wheel cover around your entire steering wheel to make sure it is snug and safe. As you can see in this photo, I have my completed steering wheel cover and it's sewed on tightly. I hope this tutorial was helpful and that you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Bye!